Hey y'all, this is Jennifer G with the Real Housewife of Texas podcast. This is the first episode and we're really excited about it. We have a hot topic for today, actually, a few little topics that we're going to talk about today. I'm here with my husband, Keno, because we always want to hear that male's perspective too. And we're just going to do what we always do. We're always talking, chatting about stuff, like I mentioned in the intro, which, by the way, if you guys didn't listen to the introduction to this podcast, you might want to go back and just listen to that just so you can have some background on the two of us and what kind of brought this podcast to be. So make sure that you check that out, and also tell your friends about it. Like I said, this is going to be a fun podcast. We'll have lots of interesting topics. We definitely want our listeners to be part of it. So definitely leave comments, like, and share. And be a part of the conversation because this is an open dialogue. We want everybody to be part of it. But one of the things that I thought should be like, the start of the podcast, as far as conversation wise, is in reference to dating. Because right now, as you can see, the dating shows are taking over the internet, taking over television. Dating shows are dominating as far as the top shows that are on TV these days. And I think it's because they're interesting. A lot of them are reality shows, so people are really into the reality shows. But then also the element of dating. Dating can get very interesting, and so I think that's why people really buy into it and like to, watch the shows and stuff like that. So, same for us. We're married. We've been married for 24 years, but we still enjoy watching dating shows. And it brings a lot of dialogue about between the two of us. So we just basically that's what we're doing on these podcasts is we're just gonna open up some of the dialogue that we've always had and make it to where everybody could be part of it. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was there'll be a couple of key points that we're going to talk about today. I also would like to also feature a listener's comment or question. So we're going to do that as well. But to open up, the first thing I wanted to talk about was one thing that I notice, and again, make sure you go back and listen to the introduction because one of the things that I mentioned in the introduction is that I actually am a relationship expert. I worked in a relationship industry for many years as a dating coach, and I did a lot of data collecting on people that I was, going to be bringing in to be matched and so on and so forth. So, one of the things that I notice about people who are out there dating is that when dating starts, like even in the beginning stages, when you first meet the person and you start having those beginning conversations, even on the phone or through Messenger, Instagram chat, however you guys met, one thing that you're doing at that time when you first meet somebody is you're going to be doing a lot of data collecting. I heard this be talked about on a podcast that I listened to, and I thought it was an interesting subject because it's so true. And I wanted to kind of feature that. I had said to myself, if I ever have a podcast, I definitely want to talk about data collecting too, because it's so true. When you first meet somebody, that first couple of months or so that you're dating, what you're technically doing is a lot of data collecting. You're collecting data. Um, that's the times that you are, figuring out, is this somebody that I want to continue with? That's the times that you're also noticing your first set of red flags, if there are any. Um, you're noticing, quirks and things that, may or may not work for you. You're collecting lots of data. And if people would take that part of dating a little bit more serious, then I think that we'll make some better informed decisions about who we are dating. As I'm watching these shows, that's what I'm noticing not really being done enough. Like, people will see red flags, you know, that's part of your data collecting right there. Those are things that you need to put in your think tank and, kind of keep it there, sort of your emotional bank account, go ahead and collect that and put it in there for later, because it may, if it continues to persist, if it's something that you don't like, if it seems like it's a red flag to you, it may be something that you need to kind of save and think about later, like, okay, I'm noticing a pattern of this behavior, so we need to take the data collecting part a little bit more serious when we're dating. We're not just, I know in the beginning it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of banter going on, and it's supposed to be fun. Dating's supposed to be fun. But the serious part about it is that you should be like seriously collecting data here. Like, things that you need to be putting in your, again, your think tank, and keep it there. Kind of, I don't know if you even need to compartmentalize some of it and say, okay, this is a do, or this is a don't, or this is something I like, this is something I don't like. I think we do it subconsciously anyway, but we need to be a little bit more serious about it, because then that will help us, further on in the relationship. What do you think about that, Keno? He's the software engineer here, so I like to use those terms because that's part of his world. So data collecting is something that he does. So what do you think about that?
I'm just laughing at the word data collection or the data collecting. I think when I hear the word data collecting, to me, it just means having a normal conversation with somebody, but also taking in certain things about them. You're already sizing up in your own mind positive, negative things that you like about them immediately that kind of line up with the so-called dream man or dream woman that you want to be with. And you're like, oh, does she check this box? She checks this box. She checks this box, whether it's negative or positive. So when I hear data collecting, that's what it means to me. I'm thinking, okay, what are these things that, could be a reason to continue to proceed? This is how we know within a certain time frame if we want to continue to date that person. Just to give you insight, yes, she is the dating expert. I've just taken dating as a, if we're going to use the term or data collecting as a conversational piece in this discussion, I think about the women that I dated prior to dating her, and not even thinking about marriage at all. I mean, honestly, I wasn't thinking about it until the year prior to meeting her. I started dating a bunch of women, and it was more, honestly, it was some data collecting that was going on. It wasn't even intentional. And it's so weird how it became more of a psychological thing that over time, I started putting together the woman I could see myself with long term, married wise. By the time I met Jennifer, I was like, oh, I'm thinking I probably want a little bit more out of a relationship. And so that's how we're able to kind of nip it in the bud with these relationships, even if it seems like we're tossing these people to the side, not necessarily just saying, you're not good enough for me. You're probably just not the person that I want. Mm-hmm. Because what I want, you can't offer that to me, or you're not checking those boxes. And I think we have to be careful because she's looking from dating shows and her dating life where she had to help couples and help people possibly meet their dream woman or their dream man, because she worked for dating companies and stuff like that. So she has that level of expertise that precedes mine. My stuff comes from not only real life experiences, but also, like I said, watching stuff on TV and understanding people's psychological thinking and understanding how people operate within relationships. And then just, I guess, on a normal level, understanding what people really want. That's, I
Mm-hmm.
think people spend more time dating, but not really coming to a real conclusion. What do you want out of a relationship?
Right.
And not just something cliche, but something that's got some legitimacy to it, some foundation to it, something that's solidified, that's going to hold ground and be something y'all can actually build on together. Where do you see it? Because like for us, this is what I asked when I finally did meet Jennifer and we had our first conversation. We talked for 4 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I asked her, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What is your current plans? What are you trying to do with your life? What are your dreams, goals, and aspirations? Do you want a house? Do you want this? Do you want, what's your dream vacation? All these questions that we went into, and it was
Yeah.
honestly, it almost was like an interview, not even purposely, but it was like an interview with no intentions. But at the same time, I felt like at the end of that 4 hour discussion with her, I felt like I knew her in such a small frame of time. I think the questions that I was asking her checked off a lot of boxes in my mind, to where after a month, I already knew. I told one of my friends at that time, I was like, I'm going to marry that woman. And he was like, for real? And I was like, yeah. And it was never a question. Nothing like, I didn't question it, because just going back to that year, because we got married in the year 2000, but the year 1999, I had dated several women, and I was able to quickly size them up and go, oh, you got some potential, but you ain't what I want. Or you got this going for yourself, but it ain't quite what I want. I'm not saying it out loud to them. I'm saying it internally. I'm taking data in and I'm collecting, if we stick with this term.
Yeah. You
I,
collected data. Yeah.
so I was able to make an assessment. Oh, because it wasn't, because for me, and I can just be transparent. It wasn't just about looks, because looks will fade over time. Things change, body changes. We're in our 40s now. We've been married for 24 years, like she said. So things have changed over time, but the love proceeds a lot of those things. So you end up, even at the age of 21, I was able to make an assessment within my own head and say, hey, that's just the surface stuff. I want to go beneath the surface. So she was able to answer questions spiritually, how she wants her child to be treated, how she wants to be treated in relationships. And, we were able to discuss a lot of things. So what helped me get to that point, because like they say, dating is really, or courting, or whatever term you use to talk about that, that's just the build up or the lead up to get to where you want to
Whatever
be,
destination you're
whatever
trying to get
destination you're
to.
trying to get to. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of people don't realize that if you just dating for the sake of dating, that's what you're going to get out of it. But if you have no true intentions behind dating, then you're not going to find what you're looking for. Because we've had this discussion before. When I hear women and when I hear men say there ain't no good women out there, or there ain't no good men out there are.
Yeah. There
There really
are.
are. It's just that what you're putting out there, whatever you're putting on the hook, as far as your bait to bring them in, that's what you're gonna get. If you notice that you keep getting the same type of dudes, or if the guys notice they keep getting the same type of women, maybe that means you need to go outside of your box. Maybe that means you need to grow a little bit more. That means you need to do a little soul searching. And it doesn't necessarily mean the person need to grow. That means you need to grow. And that's when you do need to have those real heart to heart conversations. So even over the course of our marriage, I've asked hard questions. And when I say hard questions, I mean being honest about who I am as a person and things that I need to change. What is it? I flat out one year at the age of 26, I went around my job and I asked everybody, what is it something about me that you don't like? Oh, people are quick to offer up. And so so yes, was my feelings hurt by the end of the day? Yes, but I had did some data collecting of my own, and I said, "Oh, you don't like it when I do this," or "Oh, you don't like it when I do this," or "Oh, you don't like this." And really, it wasn't more so an attack on my character. It was more of a building, and it was more out of people that didn't know me and people that did know me and people that really did know me, just being open and honest. Nobody was yelling at me. Nobody was spitting venom at me. They were just telling me, I just noticed this about you. So it let me know, hey, first of all, it's something that I can work on. And second of all, it's something I can change.
Yeah. And that's very true too. That's another thing that I definitely wanted to touch on is, you know, one thing that is frustrating sometimes would be frustrating about matching people. Um, because I not only, matching people for work, but, just even in general in life, I'm just, like I mentioned in the intro, I'm just a natural born matchmaker. I've always made it my business, if somebody likes somebody, to be involved in that part. I love love, so I always want people to find their person, so I would, be the friend that it's like, oh, you like Daryl, and we all hung out together, and oh, she liked Daryl. Okay, well, I'm gonna talk to Daryl and let him know, and see what he think, and if he liked her too or whatever, so anyway, but getting to the point, um one of the things that we need to do as people also is, because we are going to be collecting data on each other, but we also need to, like Keno is saying, collect some data about ourselves. Like, what I'm tired of hearing is, and I'm gonna speak from a woman's perspective because I'm a woman. So I'm just, I'm not hating on the women or nothing like that, but I'm just saying, you know, I'm just, I'm a woman, so I'm just speaking about women at the moment. Um, because I hear a lot of, girlfriends or just, people in general that I'm talking to about dating talk about, to the cows come home, what other people need to change. Like, girl, you know, he had the nerve to show up on the date with, such and such car, or, girl, his shoes was hooded out, or, all this stuff about basically about what the guy didn't have going on. And a lot of times I'm sitting there thinking, when they're telling me about all the stuff that the guy didn't have going on, they done named about, in the conversation, maybe about 20 things that he just didn't have going on. And I'm thinking, well, girl, I mean, you driving a Honda yourself, or um I mean, you not exactly at the top of your career either, or, so we need to do some collecting on ourselves too. Like, what am I bringing to the table? Like, this whole term of I am the table. Girl, bye. Like, it's a lot of times people saying that, and it's like, that's why, I mean, what was that one guy? We talk about him all the time. There's this one guy. He passed away, bless his heart.
Oh, you talking about Kevin Samuels?
Kevin Samuels. You know
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Kevin Samuels was rough. Okay.
No, he was brutal.
He was very brutal.
There's we talk about it all the time. There's a difference between being honest and then being brutally
Yeah,
honest.
he was a bit, bit much.
He would do the difference of what I was just saying about attacking someone's character.
Yeah, he was bad about that. But what I am gonna say,
when you cut it up.
is that
You could walk away with something that was
there were times where some of the things he said was true, and this is one of the times that I'm actually agreeing with when he would say that. It's like you need to, I understand that we all have certain standards and things like that, but it's like sometimes we're so hell bent on what the other person does or doesn't have, and sometimes we can be a little bit much because it's like, well, what do you have, like,
yeah.
are you just because some people are just unrealistic. Like, what's that one lady you were telling me about? A lady one time, I don't know, she was on some kind of podcast or something, and she was just like super ridiculous with like what she was requesting, and she didn't even have. I think you said she when things were turned around on her, and was like, well, what you bring to the table, or how are you showing up,
I think
you
they
know?
I can't remember. It may have been a clip or something that I was watching. And it could have been a podcast that I was watching because I watch a lot of content, and yet again you'll begin to notice the running theme between the two of us is that we take in a lot of information, and we're not just going to spew out a bunch of random junk. We're going to listen to what's being said, but we're also going to make an assessment from both sides,
Mm-hmm.
hear each other out, even in our own day to day. But I think the takeaway ultimately was that we have to just realize what is it that we truly do offer. You know, are we just or do we have these false expectations? Because the real conversation that's been going on, unfortunately, is that people have come and it could have just I I don't know, maybe it's a mixture of a lot of things. Maybe it's a mixture of social media taking over conversational pieces with people and making it to be the standard where you got to have the three sixes. When I tell people this the three sixes is that you got to be 6 feet tall, have a 6 figure income, and have a 6 inch penis. And it's just like, well, not everybody gonna have all three. I mean, just realistically. But I think with what Jen is talking about is that the lady wanted all these things from the man, but she didn't even have anything going on for herself.
Right.
And that can lose men because we don't honestly, and I tell Jen all the time, I was like, babe, we men, the conversations that I've had, the conversations that I've listened to, most of the times, and it's maybe it's old school, maybe it's always been this way, but men are not always checking for what a woman has. We're usually not checking for. We're more so looking at how she carries herself. Is she a lady, or is she a lady for the streets? Does she wear? I always tell people this. I say, the funny thing is, a lot of the things that I needed from Jen, I didn't have to really ask for it. It was already there. When you're dealing with a woman versus a girl or a child, you don't have to wrestle with them about how they dress, how they carry themselves. Because when you're dealing with a lady, you don't have to get into these long conversations.
She's gonna exude
She's
those
gonna
things
exude those
already.
attributes immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you just keep pushing. Or if you're with her when she's still in her development stages, the hope is that she does blossom into that. And the same thing for you as well, that you blossom into the man that she sees in you. You may not exude that on the exterior, but it is growing and it's starting to come there. Just like I was saying about me, I had to learn some things about myself and start taking heed to what was being said and saying, okay, these are things that I can definitely work on. Or I'm not at that stage in my life yet where I'm really ready to receive what you're telling me. And I think truthfully, once we reach a certain age, some people, the fight is even stronger or more intense with being able to grow or mature in certain areas where you don't feel like everything is a battle. You don't feel like everything has to be said. You don't feel like you need to fight for everything. Because if at the end of the day, is it detrimental? Like, is this something that has to change or not? But yeah, I think with the discussion that Jen is mentioning is that she basically wanted all these things in her man, but then when
When it
he's looking
was,
at her, it's almost like, well, I don't need to do no changing, or what I bring to the table is the table.
I'm bringing a whole, I am the
I am
table.
the table, and when I hear I am the table, that means I'm enough. I'm already there.
But he has to have X, Y, Z, F,
So you gotta be
G, H, T,
you
whatever.
yeah you gotta be careful about those things, because then that person will move past you. Because if you already think you are a 10 or you are the table, then that means you don't have no areas that you feel like, oh, I need to grow or develop mentally, physically, spiritually, or whatever the case may be. I'm already a done product. Well, then the question will start to be, why don't you already have a man? Or why don't you already have a woman? So I don't ever feel like there's never going to be a time where we can't stop growing.
Right. There's
I
always
don't.
room to
There's
grow.
always room to
And
grow.
and that's basically what I'm getting at is that we need to be checking ourselves too in dating. Like, don't always be so quick to, because like I said, we are collecting data. We're both doing that, and if you're a smart dater, both people are going to be doing that. But you also need to be realistic about yourself. Like, honey, do you need to heal first before you're out here dating these men? Men, do you need to work through some anger issues, or,
Past
you
trauma.
got some past trauma that you haven't dealt with?
Yeah.
Do you need to be dealing with that before you're out here dating? We need to check ourselves and make sure. I guess overall, what I'm saying is that we need to be in a healthy place before we just out here dating people.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that is going on. And that's why you have such catastrophes on these dating shows that we love to watch. Like, some of the shows we love to watch is like Married at First Sight. That's like my favorite show. I've been a fan of that show since day one. And let me tell you, it has went on ups and downs, peaks and valleys, but I have stuck with them. This last season was an absolute crap show. I love Colorado people because I've visited Colorado several times. I have a aunt and family that lives there that I love so much. And the people there are wonderful, but I don't know what the hell happened on, this last season of the Colorado season, but it was a crap show. You know, everybody was lying. I mean, if you haven't watched Married at First Sight, I think it was what, season 18, I believe it was.
Yeah. I don't even know.
Please go back and watch it because it was just
I think it was
a
hard for
hot mess.
people. Now everybody's worried about this so called, and it's not real. It's just so called cancel culture, and so I notice it more so with the younger generation, the 20-year-olds, and maybe even 30-year-old people. They, because 40-year-old people don't care, and 50 and up, they don't really care. What I took away from the snippets that I did watch, because I didn't watch it in its entirety. Normally I watch, but I had already bowed out because they drag out the seasons unnecessarily with these next week, and it'd be like 5 more episodes, and I'm like, okay, I
Yeah, it went a
can't.
little long this time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't deal with all that, and I'm glad I bowed out of this season because it was a hot stinking mess, and really I think it was just people not being honest with each other,
Yeah.
and they didn't know how to have that conversation without worrying about the people coming at them with the pitchforks in the comments, and oh, you ain't, because the first thing people do, this is unfortunate, is that when you reject someone, the first thing people will do is attack your character, or how you're dressed, or how you look, or how you act. Well, you can't talk because you got a lazy eye, or you got this going on, and it's like that has nothing to do with a person's attraction to the other person. If they're not attracted to them, they're just not attracted. And you can't force attraction, and that's what a lot of those people were really just trying to say, even though on
But they just weren't
paper,
being on. The
yeah,
whole
they weren't
thing
being
was that they
honest.
weren't being honest.
Yeah, on paper it
And they
looked like
weren't being honest,
with
like
the
we're
show as
saying
well.
about themselves. Like,
Yeah,
I need work. Like when everything was said and done, come to find out, it's like, girl, one lady was I didn't forgot the girl name, but she was a whole studying to be a psychologist and was almost finished with school. And this girl had all kinds of issues going on.
Yeah.
Clearly hadn't really
Really fast.
evaluated herself, you know? So that's what we're saying too, is that, during those data collecting stages, collect some data about yourself. Are you healthy enough yourself to even be out here dating? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Because that's, like I said, that's what I'm seeing on a lot of these shows. These people are not even ready to be dating.
Yeah.
And they on a whole ass dating show.
I think that's why they, I tell Jenna, I tell her, I said, as hard as it is to believe, everybody at the end of the day, they want somebody. And clearly, these people coming on Married at First Sight, they want somebody so bad, they're willing to marry somebody blindly. But I always tell her, the hope is that when these people walk away, they walk away and go back and watch the film,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't deny what's on the tape.
Yeah.
The editors, I edit stuff all the time. You can't edit that much to turn it and make it seem like this person is a villain.
Right.
If that's how you come off to people, we can chop these tapes up and everything as much as we want to, but
Some of that
if you're
stuff is just who
confrontational,
you
you're just
are.
confrontational.
Yeah.
Or if you have a hard time receiving criticism, you just have a hard time receiving criticism. Or if you think that you are better than the people in the entire room, that's how you perceive yourself. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
it's coming off. The hope is that most of these people will begin to learn something about themselves. Because I was telling, I was telling her the other day, we was having a discussion, um, kind of even talking about the question at hand about communication, and just saying that we have to realize sometimes we're not even talking to that person, we're talking to their issues. And that's why it's hard to get to that person, to their heart from your heart, just telling them, hey, listen, I'm just being vulnerable and talking to you about something that hurt me. And they're too busy being defensive because they think you are attacking them. But really, it's old issues that's never been resolved. So they never learned how to properly communicate something or properly understand that in this moment, it's not about what you did, it's about how you did it. And maybe it's something that you need to change, or your approach needs to change. Or when you're talking to me, consider these things first type stuff. Some of us never even grew up with those lines of communication where, for me, when I grew up, I didn't see people communicating without yelling or communicating without acting a fool. That I don't, far in between conversations that I heard that were sound conversations where people were actually talking to each other, addressing the issue, coming to a proper conclusion, and actually coming up with the right solution to where both parties felt like, oh, I was heard in this situation. I was heard in this conversation. We're good. When you don't have those fundamentals given to you, you have to learn through your relationships, unfortunately, or your spouse telling you, or your girlfriend or your wife or whoever it may be, has to be the one to tell you those things.
And that's what ends up happening, is that, if when you haven't dealt with all these things, and then you're jumping into these relationships just because you want to be with somebody, you're bringing all these issues into the relationship with you, and they're going to get addressed one way or the other, because you can't find a quicker way to bring out negatives or things that you need to work on than when you jump into a relationship. That's definitely a time where things are going to get exposed. So that's why it's important, like I said, to deal with a lot of your stuff before you even get into a relationship, which is why I'm glad that people are more open now to counseling, um, because counseling is healthy. And I'm so glad we've gotten to a point in time where counseling is not looked at as such a negative thing. It's actually positive, and more people are getting into counseling and working on themselves and realizing that there's some things that perhaps I need to straighten out with myself before I get into a relationship. So anyway, I wanted to start out about that, or start with that conversation about data collecting. I wanted to address something too. He had mentioned that, like we had a lot of pertinent conversations in the beginning of our relationship where we covered a lot of ground. And again, in that data collecting phase, that's what you should be doing, having those, um, uh, you know, questions that are hot points for you, that is something that you would like, that you need to know in order to help you figure out, is this somebody that's going to be for you or not. I'm not saying that you need to go up on your into your first date like an interview, because all, like he said, although you kind of are, you know, asking some important questions and things like that, you don't want to approach this like a HR, I'm going into an interview, but just know what are some things that's important to you. Make sure you ask those inquisitive things in the beginning. There's nothing wrong with that. There are some things that I would say don't talk about first conversation. Like I'm kind of old school. I really don't think that sex needs to be discussed like conversation number one, maybe, because that'll start the relationship on the wrong foot. Because if you're really trying to have some substance and this is just not a booty call type of situation, then let's save that for a little bit later. I'm not saying that it's not important, because it definitely is. But that's something that, let's leave that on the table to talk about a little bit later. But ask the important questions, like, if you guys are discussing whether or not, like what your dating goals are. Are you guys just going to be dating, um, just to be dating, or are we dating to get somewhere? Do we have a destination? Are we trying to get married eventually? You want to talk about the important stuff. You'll be surprised how many people go on dates and they literally talk about sports or politics or just all kinds of surface stuff, but they never get to like some of the important questions that really will help kind of define what we're doing here. I've talked to people and I'm like, well, what did y'all talk about when you first, when y'all had your first date? And I'll ask, well, did you, I'll be like, does he have any kids? Well, girl, you know what? I don't even know if he have any kids. We never did even discuss that. What? Like, does he want to have any kids? Like, I mean, these are things that you need to be talking about. Not again, not saying that you need to go into it like a HR interview, but go ahead and be thinking of some good questions to ask. And what I can do too is I will leave a couple of good, like, conversation starting questions um up on one of my I'll post about it and then put some good, first date conversations that you can have, because I think that's important. And like I said, that will definitely help you collect some data pieces that you need to be collecting in the beginning of those conversations. But I want to move off of data collecting, but I definitely wanted to talk about that, and discuss a question that one of the listeners that from the introduction asked us to address during this first podcast. So, and thank you so much to this listener. I appreciate everybody who's tuned in and listened. And again, I'm real big on, making sure that we communicate back to people that are listening to our podcast. So make sure that you do leave comments. If you have a private conversation that you want to have, then we do have our Facebook up on our on the page. It's also going to be listed, in the intro introduction of each show. You'll notice all of our information there. So if it's a question that you want to ask, but you want to be kind of anonymous about it, then definitely shoot it to us on Facebook Messenger, or you can do Instagram chat, whichever way you want to do it. You definitely, send it one way or the other. Or if you're okay with it being mentioned in the comments, you can mention in the comments too. This person sent it to me privately, and I really appreciated the format that she used. She actually did a voice clip, which was awesome because then I could actually hear her voice talk about the question, and she was able to kind of explain. So anyway, the question was dealing with communication. And what she said was so eloquently, by the way, she was just talking about how she's in this beautiful relationship, probably one of the most healthiest relationships that she's had. And they're in a really good space. I believe she mentioned, they're living together now. Um, and she's actually, going to be expecting soon, and they just have a beautiful relationship. And so all the elements are there. They get along really well. They just have a great relationship. But the thing is, she said that they are having an issue, not so much being able to communicate, but how they communicate. And her question was like, basically, how do we communicate effectively without like him feeling like it's going to be an argument? Because in the description of what she talked about, she was saying that in the beginning of their relationship, she kind of mentioned that, she was a little hothead, a little bit. She mentioned that, she kind of would, pop off, every now and then and things like that. And probably like she mentioned about her previous relationship and stuff like that. So it's probably because of, remnants from her previous relationship and how she had to handle things. But now she's in a relationship with a person that, she don't have to, pop off about stuff and things like that. So they do communicate, but what happens a lot of times is that, I guess because of the way that she used to communicate with her man, he, you know, kind of is like hesitant to talk with her because he thinks that things are going to go into an argument. So she was just saying that, she would like to be able to discuss certain things, like if they have an issue and if it's something that she feels like needs to be addressed, he kind of wants to shut down about it and like don't discuss it. But then, to her point, she's like, well, we're not, talking about the issue. And this is something that, I really need to talk about. So her question was more so like, how do we get past that? If he's shutting down in the communication, and then, so then I'm not there, then able to talk about these emotions that I'm having, or, whatever this issue is that's making me emotional, and I need to get it out. I need to discuss it. Like, how can I do that when you're shutting down the conversation because you think that everything is going to turn into an argument? And everything doesn't have to be an argument, but there are things that we need to discuss. So we wanted to answer that question, and we were kind of talking about it together. I wanted to share with you guys, what we think about that. One of the things that I say is, number one, you definitely don't want communication to be the ender of your relationship. Like, the communication doesn't have to be the end all be all of a relationship. Um, Communication is something that a lot of couples struggle with, whether they're just dating or they're married. Even married people, still have communication issues. And I think one of the reasons why, because it is the number one reason that a lot of relationships end, is because of communication. And I feel like that's like the last thing that you should be ending a relationship over, because it's something that you can overcome. It takes time. It takes getting to know each other and how you communicate with each other. Like, what are y'all's communication styles? And Keno kind of mentioned a little bit about that, with him saying that, you know, a lot of the bases have to be covered, as far as like when you first get together, how did you grow up communicating? That's important, because if you two people grew up extremely different and the communication in your household was different, that means therefore you saw a different way of communicating, that already could possibly be an issue in you all's relationship. Like, for instance, you know, like he said, he didn't really see a lot of healthy communications. He saw a lot of arguing and yelling and things like that go on, and that, to, probably to him, was normal. Well, in my household, um, it was very different, because uh, my parents were the type that, I mean, well, at least I can speak for my own self, saying, by the time I was born, and what I experienced, because you know how it is when you have siblings, everybody experiences things differently, because your parents are at different stages of their life. So by the time I'm the third child, so by the time I was born, I didn't see a lot of yelling. I guess at this point they've learned to communicate with each other to the point where a lot of communication was taken into the bedroom, and it wasn't done, that much so in front of us. So I didn't see a lot of yelling and things like that. And to me, actually, what I saw was, it seemed like, sometimes there was a lot of ignoring going on. Like, like my dad would want to talk about something, and then my mom was like, if he approached her like in a certain way or whatever, then maybe she wouldn't want to talk about it right now. So if anything, I saw that. But the point is, I didn't grow up with a lot of yelling. So already, if you start yelling at me in a conversation, I'm going to shut down. I'm not going to receive what you're saying, because I prefer not to be communicated to that way. So, that makes a huge difference, in learning to communicate with each other. What else? I'm trying to think of what else we were saying about,
Well, so
like that specific issue.
she was just asking what ways can I get, basically how can I get him to communicate, and I was telling you, I said there's a lot of ways that we communicate with each other that can actually cause hesitation with even wanting to have the conversation. If we're going to talk about the bills, let's just say we need to talk about the bills later. Guys need specifics. We don't need general statements in that moment, because most time women will come in later and say, oh, we need to talk later.
Yeah, I used to be bad
And
about that. I would just be like,
what we need to talk about? Oh, we just need to talk about it later. And we're like, okay, so now we're rattling in our head. So I think, just even with the listener's question, the first thing is, just make it known what you want to talk about, because that's going to bring the person's walls down. First of all, by just saying, hey, I I would like to talk about the conversation that we had the other day that we haven't finished. If Especially if it's a conversation that you started and stopped because the person didn't want to talk about it right now. You still want to leave it to where it can be discussed later. But yeah, my that was one of the things I was saying, is that we always have to realize clearly, just like even with us stating, our childhood, our upbringing, as far as the way we saw communication being done, was different. Most people see communication being done in a well-mannered way where both people are talking to each other, making sure each person is heard. Sometimes that comes with maturity, sometimes that comes with time, and sometimes they see that in their own household. But since sometimes you don't see things being communicated in a normal way, maybe it's in a volatile way, so that will make the person apprehensive about even getting to that, because they will have flashbacks about how conversations went in the past, even though your spouse hasn't shown to be the same type of person. Those things can be triggered by that type of event. So I think the first thing we have to start doing is just make a statement of saying what the conversation is that we want to talk about later. I'm thinking about getting a new dog. Let's talk about that later. Okay, now you told me what you want to talk about. And for me, as a guy, I'm already putting in my head, you want to talk about possibilities of getting a pet, or you want to talk about the bills, or you want to talk about going out of town on this trip, or you want to talk about preparing for the wedding, or you want to talk about XYZ. But giving specifics to things at the end helps us to start bridging the gap that, oh, there's nothing that I need to be so worried about. Now, if it's something of the magnitude of saying, hey, the other day when we had a discussion and we were out with our friends, you said something that hurt my feelings. That's probably going to be a tough subject to talk about, but you do want to give a timeline of how or when we can discuss this, because that's what we had to learn. We had to learn time to
Yeah.
discuss things.
Yeah, that's really important. Like, I like the analogy of, when people say, let's table that. That's a good concept, because sometimes it's about the timing. Like, is this the timing to talk about whatever said subject there is to talk about?
Yeah.
If it's not, then you could say, okay, let's table that and we could talk about it later, because timing could be the issue sometimes. Like, and I totally get that, because the first of all, women and men communicate very differently, and that's the number one reason why there are such communication problems, because first of all, we are two different species here. We're a woman, and a man, and we communicate different.
Yeah.
Women say thousands more words than men do. If you notice, when men are talking, they get to the point. It's very direct. Even when they're arguing with each other, it's like, dude, I ain't like when you tap me on the shoulder like that. Look a little suspect. And he's like, oh well, man, I ain't know that bothered you, whatever. So my bad. And that's literally the end of the conversation. With women, you know, it may take us a week to even talk about it, because first of all, we go like, well, she should have known that when she tapped me like that, it bothered me. So then we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Then we bring it up when we done got upset about it, because it's been festering for a week.
Yeah.
And then we blurt out like all the details about it, and so anyway, what I'm trying to say is that we already communicate very differently to begin with. So knowing
Each other's style.
your styles of communication, yes, is key.
Yeah.
And after 24 years of marriage, Keno knows that I'm a very detail oriented person. So I like to discuss, like in my discussion, I've got to include the details. And sometimes he may not want to hear the details, but he also knows that that's how I communicate. Like, I'm going to break the whole thing down. And that way, to me, it's like, that way you don't feel like you've missed out on any of this part, like seeing where it went wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start from the beginning and
I
say,
think with her, she just feel like she need to cover all bases.
yeah,
So you fully understood what I was trying to bring across to you.
right,
And so the timing also can be detrimental, because finding the right time to discuss things, because sometimes that person, if it's a sore subject that's probably touchy, it's probably not the right time to talk about it, because you want, like they say, cooler heads prevail. So it's always better to have both parties at the right time have the discussion, so then both people can be heard. That ain't always gonna happen, but if you can make it happen, make it happen.
So if it needs to be tabled for a later time, and it's all in the way that here. Another thing we learn after all these years of being married too is it's also all in the way that you say things. Like he said, you know, in the beginning, very early stages of our relationship, I would, call him sometimes at work and be like, because it's in my mind right now. So I'm thinking about it. And I would call him at work. And then I would say, hey, later we need to talk. And I might say a couple other things and then I'd get off the phone. And, after so many discussions about that, he was like, look, don't call me at work and say, later we need to talk, and then don't even like give me nobody's subject line of what it is that we're
Because you
discussing.
you ultimately are putting that person in almost a fight or flight state of mind, because they start thinking the worst. Really,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you go. It's just like when your boss, if your boss would say, Johnson, we need to talk later, and you're like, okay, and they don't even give no context, they don't give no details or anything, you're probably thinking the worst. Especially, let's just be honest, if you had a bad report, or a bad review previously. Not that I've had one, but it just goes in this conversation of saying that it can make the mind wander down the wrong path,
Yeah.
and then the person probably just wanted to talk about a light subject rather than. That's why I'm saying it's just good to just give specifics as to what you want to discuss later.
And
You
I
know,
was laughing when we talked about it because I was like, I don't know. I thought to myself, why did I do that? And then I told him, I said, I think because one time I was watching like a TikTok and there was a TikTok about that very thing where the woman kept coming to the guy and she's like, Jason, we need to talk. And he was, he had like all these bubbles going on, like,
yeah.
dang, did
It's just
I
like
did I
for
close? Did I put the laundry up after I
It's just like
took it
when you
out the
texting
dryer?
somebody
Or
and they done sent you a quick text, but then the other person sent you a text and you see the bubbles, and you keep seeing the bubbles. You seen the three
it's like
dots.
room for
Well, the three dots,
like,
because you don't know what you're like. Oh, why are they taking so long to respond back? Is this gonna
yeah.
be a good thing or a bad thing? Because when my boss would message me back, I'd be like, okay, you really got something on your mind. Is what is it? And then they'd be like, you did really well on your last call with your client. Like, well, why didn't you just say that? I mean, it just goes without saying. So I think just trying to keep it.
I think women though tend to I because I was like I had to think about that and go like why did I do that, because I very well could have just told him what it was about. But
Building
I told him,
suspense.
I said, I think women like to have that little irony or something
Building
because
suspense.
I could have very well said what it was, but
So
I
so
did
with
used to
the
do that.
so with her with the listener's question, what we have to just consider first of all, how did that person grow up communicating? How do you and then find out the big question: how do you normally deal with so-called confrontation?
Hmm.
Do you not deal with it at all? Do you need to be able to process what's being asked of you at that time? Or do you go head in? Because there's only so many styles of how you handle that situation. So you would need to find out how that person handles communication.
Yeah.
You may have to start off small with that person and build up to those conversations, because it really just go back to trust, trusting that whatever I'm about to tell you, this is from a place of love. Even if I'm criticizing something that you did that hurt me, I'm still coming from a place of love.
Hmm.
I'm not angry with you, but I'm more so upset, or I may be hurt by what you said, and even the space of where you said it, because I learned with with Jen that she don't like to have conversations about certain things in the public. You know, like if we're gonna have, especially if we're gonna have something that we know could possibly be a heated debate of discussion between the two of us, we really need to have it just amongst the two of us. People don't like to be fronted out,
Mm-hmm.
so that's something I had to learn over years, and that's a good thing. You know, you take that with you. But just keeping it at that the listener's question, I think the big thing is find out where the breakdown happens. At what
Yeah.
point does that person feel like they need to abandon the conversation, and
And,
why is it they
and
want to have
maybe
that other?
ask, maybe you guys can ask each other, because maybe you've never actually even done this. Why don't you ask each other how you would like to be communicated to? Because the thing is, we can't be going around avoiding conversation either, especially if it's something that's important to one another, you know. And if you love that person, you definitely want to make sure that you're addressing, you know, whatever issue there is at hand. Um, you know, so you definitely want to take heed to what they're saying and hear them out, and listen to feelings, and you know, validate feelings if you have to, or you know, you want to talk about it. You don't want to avoid it.
And I learned,
So
I was gonna say too, I learned something about your techniques. People have a hard time doing this, but it actually brings down walls. And some people don't realize, like we were discussing even before we started, is that we're going against the issue. We're not going against each other.
right, I heard that. I heard that be said, and I thought it was like really profound. I always like collect profound statements, and I
But
used to
yeah,
share them
so
on my Facebook. But the actual thing that was said was couples would be better with communication if they both can realize and keep in mind that it's us against the issue, not us against each other.
yeah, yeah,
So if you can get into that mindset, then you can kind of approach each conversation knowing that, okay, they're not coming at me. We have this issue that we need to discuss and it's detrimental to our relationship, but I'm not coming at you, you're not coming at me, but we're going to tackle this issue together.
yeah. And then I learned too, too much distance while you're having a conversation can cause a rift in the conversation as well. Meaning, if one person's sitting on way on the other side of the room, and then the other person sitting on the other side of the room, sometimes that can cause an issue. And the reason why is because that person is not feeling close to you at that moment. If you're having a conversation in a short distance to each other, you're more, it's a weird receptive thing that happens. You're more willing to listen to each other. And I know sometimes it's hard for people to even hold hands. Sometimes if you feel like you finna get ready to tell somebody something hard, hold their hands for a second. Because it's gonna change.
The
It's,
energy.
it's gonna
It's
change the
because of the
energy.
energy. Yeah.
Because when you're distant from each other, you feel like we're in a battle. This is a war now. What you just said, I don't care that it hurt your feelings. Now I'm going to tell you about how you hurt my feelings. And it's like, how did the conversation get to that? Well, because you are on two opposite sides of the room. So body language, I guess, and like she's saying, even your energy can be detrimental yet again to conversations or discussions getting heated when it's just really merely somebody bringing something to the table that needs to be addressed. The closer the proximity, the less likely it's going to be heated. And even like they say, some stuff that may seem cheesy to people, we've done it before. Look in each
Mm-hmm.
other's eyes for about a minute, and then have your discussion because you want that person to know, hey, just like they say, intimacy means I'm into you. I'm not just here to just say something that's going to hurt your feelings. I'm really here to help our relationship because Jen and I kind of made a almost a decree with one another is that we're at a point in our relationship where we're in this together to fight for the relationship, whatever it is, even if it's something that's been hard or we're having something that's difficult at the moment. We're in this together to try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about it for hours on end and try to figure out where did we go wrong in this conversation, or what was it that really bothered you, because that's really what you want to get to, is getting down to the real root of what really hurt that person.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's something, and this is the other thing, we have to learn how to step inside each other's people's shoes and sympathize with them. Like, things that sometimes she may find that hurt her don't bother me, or sometimes stuff that may bother me don't bother her. But that still doesn't mean that the person wasn't hurt. But you still got to understand from that person's perspective where it really hurt them, or did this really bother you? And if it did, okay, well then I'll try to be more aware of it, self-conscious about, or conscious of it before I step on your toes again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to look down and just think about it before I do it. Like, okay, let me make sure.
But we know that couples are going to have disagreements, and you know what? This is another thing that I heard. And let me just tell y'all right now, I'm gonna go ahead and give y'all this disclaimer. Dr. Phil is my psychologist, so I love his quotes and I have a lot of respect for that man. Some people do not like him because he's such a straight shooter, and I happen to really respect a lot of things he says, so I collect a lot of his different slogans and things like that he says, because I love the way that he kind of illustrates stuff. Which, by the way, Dr. Phil, if you happen to be listening, I am trying to get tickets to that show because I know that you've moved back to Texas now, and I have signed up for that like several times. I have not got my tickets yet. So, not that Dr. Phil will be listening to little old me, but if you are, then please send me the tickets.
I am going to say
I have to go to the show.
This is going to be the good part about doing this podcast, because you always want to do something together, but then you also want to do something that two different people bring two different perspectives.
Yes.
Because that is her guy, and I'm on the other side. I don't necessarily don't like Dr. Phil, but I'll be like, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just like, next. But I'm not. I'm more of a, like, I'm a logical, reasonable guy, but if it don't follow within logic and reason for me, I keep it pushing, and I'll be like, after so many years, I'm like, all right, Dr. Phil, you in your 70s now. Now you sound like my grandpa or something. It's just like, now you're just shooting off a bunch of sayings.
Well, he still know what he's talking about.
But that's what I'm only saying, that because that's what you love. That's what she wants. She feels good hearing this straight shooter type thing certain times, and she doesn't. It's
like I love the things that he says. Like, for instance, he mentioned that one day. He was like, okay, people, folks that go around, because I've literally had people tell me, oh yeah, we never argue. Okay, well, like he said before, if everybody has disagreements, right? So, I mean, and the reason being is because when you're in a relationship with somebody, y'all are not clones of each other. So there's no way that every day, all day, 365 days of the year, 24 hours a day, you have the same view. You just don't. Yeah. That's just impossible. But I realize, people that have said that just perhaps is just not there yet, mature wise in their relationship to realize that, no, y'all are having, some differences of opinion here. It doesn't have to always be called an argument, because I think maybe the issue is that people think, an argument has to be like yelling or whatever. That's not necessarily always the substance of an argument. You can be disagreeing about something, but the point is, if you're not ever having differences of opinion, then probably what's happening is that somebody is always appeasing to the other person.
Yeah.
So basically what Dr. Phil was saying was that somebody's opinion ain't getting heard, and that's
truly ain't happy.
Yeah, somebody's over here just saying yes to you, because they probably don't want to argue or don't want to,
Upset you.
upset you or whatever. So therefore they're not even giving their opinion.
Yeah.
And that person eventually is going to probably explode because they got a lot of stuff that they really have to say that they haven't been saying. So then you're going to get the person that one day randomly that just shoots off and pops off and, starts saying all this stuff. And you're like, where did this come from? Well, this come from 12 years of me not saying how I really felt, So I don't ever let people tell me that they've never had disagreements or arguments or whatever. Everybody disagrees about something. And it's healthy because guess what? Our disagreements are an opportunity. If you could look at it this way, it'll help your relationship. Disagreements are an opportunity to learn more about each other. So if you two have different perspectives, it's an opportunity for you to learn a perspective that maybe perhaps you didn't even consider. So having disagreements can be healthy, you know, but so just keep that in mind too. But we definitely wanted to touch on that because it sounds to me like this couple has a very good relationship. It's just that they may have communicated different, maybe in past relationships and stuff like that. So that may be why he's shutting down because he doesn't want to argue. But what he has to understand is that everything doesn't have to be leading to an argument. Just because you two are discussing something that's an issue doesn't have to, lead into an argument. You can have a very healthy debate about something, and it's okay to have two different opinions, and that's where the slogan comes. It's we can agree to disagree. Sometimes you have to end the conversation with that. Sometimes we're not going to be able to agree on the subject at hand, but we can agree to disagree. We've heard each other out. We may not agree on this, and we may not ever agree on this, but we are able to hear each other. And I think that's the most important part, is that both people need to be respected and be able to be heard. But like we said, go ahead and maybe have a conversation about how do you like to be communicated to, because I want you to be able to receive what I'm saying, and I want us to be able to discuss issues that we're having, because sometimes we're going to have things that we definitely need to talk about because it's detrimental to our relationship. So you don't want to avoid those topics. You don't want to, avoid those things. You do want to discuss it, but maybe it needs to be tabled for later because maybe it's not a good time to discuss it, and you guys need to talk about a time frame to talk about it. Or B, maybe after explaining what type of communication style you have, that'll help them to receive it a little better. I like for you to write things down because, you get to making all kinds of facial expressions or something like that. And that makes me shut down because I get triggered from when I was a kid and, conversations went like that and I would shut down. So maybe you need to write it out, maybe a letter is better or something like that. But go ahead and have that discussion of how you want to be communicated to, because I think that we go into communicating with our partners how we've always communicated, and maybe that don't work for them. So if you had a yelling partner before, and you're a person and your spouse or partner is a person that doesn't like to be yelled to, that's not going to work for me. So I need to tell you that. I need to say, listen, my parents didn't even yell at me as a child. So I'm not going to sit here and listen to you yell at me, and we're, grown adults here. So, you need to probably discuss how you want to be communicated to. That's important. And then one last thing I wanted to leave the conversation with is, and this has been done and this has been talked about on TV before, on a movie before, but we were doing this way back before I saw this be done on a movie. Um, and we got it from like a pastor or something that we listened to before. But one of the things that we do to just kind of keep checking in with each other over the years, we really haven't done it lately. But I know for sure for the first 10 years of our marriage, every anniversary, we would do what we call the 10 things. And it's just a great, you know, tool to use to communicate with each other. And it's really effective. And what it is that you would write down 5 things that you liked about each other, as far as, 5 things that's working about your partner. So you start out with those positives, like these are 5 things that you do that I like, that really works for us. And then you on the opposite end of that, you write down the 5 negative things that you feel like these are some things or some areas to improve, or some things that I don't like that you do that I feel like would be detrimental to our relationship, and we need to work on maybe trying to change that stuff, or figure out a better way to do it, or a solution. And we would write those things down privately, and then we would exchange it to each other. And we both get to read off each other's list, and then we would discuss it. The good thing about doing it that way is that it's constructive criticism, but it's also fair criticism, because both of you at that point are exchanging something, for each other. So I'm not just sitting here spewing out all your negatives. You're also telling me what my negatives are, and what, are some things that I can work on. And it's interesting how when you start doing that, those lists change. And, it may even get to a point where it's not even 10 things anymore, because those lists get shorter and shorter as you learn each other. So that's a tool that I think would be good for, you out there as couples to try, is maybe doing that. We did it on our anniversary because that was just like a good time to check in every year. Not to say that we didn't, have conversations throughout the year, but that was a time where we just knew we were going to sit down and do this activity. And it just really helped our communication, especially those first 10 years where it's really needed. We don't do it as much anymore, because now we've learned so much about each other that we kind of know how to communicate with each other. But we learn, still every day about things that we can do to help our communication get better. But at this point, it's been 24 years, so we definitely do well with communicating with each other, even when it's tough. So so I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Sorry, this one went a little long. They probably always won't be this long, but whatever's necessary. I just felt like, these were some things that we definitely wanted to expand on. But again, tell a friend about the podcast, The Real Housewife of Texas. And like I said, my husband will be joining us, because it's always great to hear that male